All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today we are going to be examining several different aspects in the U.S. history. Now, the thing is, before we get into it, I want to say that this is the last week of the grading period. So, if you have any work you need to turn it in now, as soon as you can, because that Friday, when the grading period ends, I will not be um, accepting any more work. Okay, so be sure you turn in between now on Monday to Thursday. Okay, even if it's late Thursday, like 9 o'clock, fine, but no later. Don't submit it on Friday because I won't be able to get into the grade books. Okay, so let's move on. So we're going to be looking at the importance of roads, railroads, canals. We're also going to be looking at the rise of immigration and in where they're at, mainly in the northern states. And we're going to create an argument on whether nativism supporters actually have a claim um, to their reasoning. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But first, let's do the warm-up picture. So there it is right there. I believe on there put 2 or 3 things that you see. Okay. And second picture is, what do you think this artist is trying to say? So that bottom writing part, which is with energy prices going up, I had an idea. Um, that should really help you out into what you think this artist is trying to say. Okay, so go ahead, answer these the warm-up questions because we're moving on. So pause the video if you're not done. But we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. So, in early 1800s, transportation really started to take off. Okay, the thing is, roads, canals, and railways were really stretching from one part of the country to another part. Now, here's how things were before now, because I know a lot of people think, well, weren't there roads already? There were, but there weren't. Okay, so there were roads, but some of them were not really done well. There was like rocks and boulders and like there, instead of digging them out and making sure the roads are nice and even, and clear, um, sometimes they'll go around it, and that type of stuff. Um, and also sometimes, it's just like if you have your own, in your own house where you're living at, sometimes if you walk the same path, you clear away. You can see in the carpet, and if you have carpet, um, or if you have like hardwood floors, after so many years, you can see a path going, and that's natural because that's how people were back then too. They'd have their carriages, their horses, and they'd go through a path. Excuse me. And as these horses and carriages went through the path, they would create a, a lane in a sense. And of course, people would follow that lane, take it and take it, take it over so many trips and so many times, um, that area of grass would eventually go away. So if you have a dog like in your backyard and they like to run in a certain area, you could usually see that that area is like balding because there's like no grass there because your dog or whatever constantly goes through that area. Okay, same thing in nature and the outside with horses and wagons. Now the north became very, very populated with factories. They wanted to build things, manufacture goods, whereas the south was more like, we're going to stick to farming because one, the climate's good for farming. Two, we have our slaves, so we're good. And the three is factories would take up a lot of farm space, and they don't want that. They want more land so they can have more crops, more money, and then they can get more slaves and things like that. Okay, that's really why there was more. If you look on the map, all you see is mainly roads and canals. They don't mind canals because canals bring water, and water to crops, that's what they love. But railroads, no, no, no. Roads, it's iffy because the thing is, roads they can actually use, their own carriages and things like that and transport their stuff. Whereas railroads, they would have to pay somebody. money to take the stuff, or they would pay money to travel from one place to another, and they don't want to do that. Okay. Now, 1806, Congress says, we had the funding to build a great American highway, but some politicians were like, does it say in the Constitution we can? It really doesn't mention it, so they're kind of like iffy on what can be done. So states, local towns, and businesses basically say, you know what, we'll pay for the roads. We'll pay for them. Now remember, some places they're off in the distance. Like so say here's the main road. Look at the camera real quick. Let's say this is the main road. Their town is way over here, and there's like very little roads to it. So they're like, we'll pay for the road to connect this to us. Okay, they wanted to pay for it, and this goes to your first question. Why would it be beneficial for the states, local towns, and private businesses to invest in roads? To again get the main road right here, and here's their little town. Why would it be important to get a road from this main road to this little town? Why? Okay. The second question is, why does the South not have as many roads and trains? So I mentioned it. So if you didn't catch it, be sure you go back and rewind it to catch the answer. Okay. So while you guys are writing, pause the video. But we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. Now, the Industrial Revolution began in Britain in the middle 1700s, and it was revolutionary. It caught on, and man, they were doing very well. So things like this over here, the first steam engine, um, stuff like that, really got things going when it comes to industry. Now, when the time it came to the United States, it was the early 1800s. Okay. Now, there's a thing called free enterprise, and that's basically when the products, prices, and services are determined not by the government but by the market. So let's say um, there's somebody wants to make a restaurant where the waiters come in and they beat you with a stick every time you say the word the. Okay. To the free enterprise people, they'd be like, let the people build that business. If it survives, it survives. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You know, it's again the services of what the people want, not what the government thinks. Like, oh, that's not, you shouldn't beat people. No, let the people decide. Some people might like that. You know, products, what's being created. You know, the other thing is prices. So a good example would be like these little things right here. Okay, um, the government might say, oh, $10 maximum is what you should spend or what you should sell those for. But under the free enterprise, if a lot of people want them, then they're saying that the company should be allowed to raise the price. You know why? Because people want them. But if nobody wants them, then it's like, no, you should not raise the price higher. You should actually raise it lower. That way you can at least sell some and make some type of money. Okay? That's what free enterprise is. Now, this really helped the Industrial Revolution. Okay? Also, kind of a perfect storm type of thing. In the United States, there was low taxes. Okay? Now, entrepreneurs had money to invest, and they would invest in companies. Okay? They would invest in, say, somebody had an idea, and they're like, you know what? I like that idea. Think that can work. So they put their money into it. So they would invest, anywhere from $100 to thousands, whoever knows. And the investor would hope for a return. Not here's the thing, not every time you invest something, you get money back. Sometimes you lose because the idea, the thought, it doesn't work out. Okay. I always give the example of a friend of mine. He came into some money. He decided he wanted to do his own like kind of record label thing. Had the studio set up, and soundproof equipment, things like that. Basically, kind of signed some people, some friends of his, and they tanked. And it was almost, I hate to say it, but it was kind of laughable. Um, they tanked so bad because they sucked, and he basically lost almost all his money because he put everything into that bad investment. Okay. Now, states wanted to industrialize. That means they wanted to get businesses. They wanted factories in their states, and they did things that kind of, I wouldn't say shady, but they kind of bent the rules a little bit. You know, some places they're like, "Oh, I would love to put a factory in your town or your state, but you know these taxes, things like that. Oh, well, don't worry, we'll lower your taxes this low, say 2% for next 10 years." You know, or they might say, "Oh, well, we would love this land, you know, but you know, there's some people living there. They're like, oh, well, we'll find a way to get around that. Don't worry, we'll, you know." So they did things to help businesses and factories. All right. So the next question is, why do you think states would want new businesses to start in their state? Um, it's actually it's a four-letter word if you add the S at the end, but it starts with a J. So that should help you out. That's one of the big ones. And think like this: if people have money, like money to spare, what do they do with it normally? What do most people do with their money if they have a lot of it? And then how does that help the economy? Okay. The next one is actually we're supposed to do in class, but you can still answer it, even though I know you'll probably change your answer. You might. So it says, which of these companies would you invest in and why? So there's a company called Cadabra. Okay. There's Best Buy, Speedy Service System, J.C. Penney, and Price Club Name. So go ahead, put your answer down. Which one would you invest in? Let's say you had an extra $5,000, you know, that you can, someone told you you have to invest this $5,000. Which one of those would you invest in and then why? Okay, so go ahead, answer the question. We're going to be moving on in 3, 2, 1. So here's the thing. Eli Whitney, the guy who invented the cotton gin, is, you know, some of you guys may or may not know. He invented this thing called interchangeable parts. Now, here's the thing: if you ever bought something from like Target, Walmart, or any other place that sells like furniture and things like that, a lot of times they'll give you a big old box, and they'll tell you that here's the stuff, you know, to make your table, to make your bookshelves, to, you know, whatever you bought. And inside there's like these little bags, and in there they have like, um, you know, a little wrench, and they have the nuts, bolts, washers, things like that. Well, see, back in the day, when you got something like a bolt, you had a nut to go with it, and the thing is, they were kind of custom together. So if you lost one of them or you broke it, you couldn't get a replacement. You couldn't go down to the store and say, "Oh, I need a washer, or I need a nut, or I need a, you know, a bolt." They'd be like, "Well, um, what kind?" I mean, we really don't have that kind of stuff. I mean, we could look over there and see if anything might work, you know. But that's the thing. A lot of these nuts and bolts and stuff like that were custom to one another. What Eli Whitney said is, you know what? We'll make all these nuts and the bolts the same, and if, let's say, someone loses one, they can get another one. Okay, and that was just mind blowing to some people. You know, wow, I can actually go to the store and get another one. Yes, yes, you can. Okay. Other factories that popped up: lumber, leather. You know, the factories for making wagons. And the thing is, they made them actually better. You know, before they were kind of flimsy, kind of, you know, broke here and there, but now they made them stronger, better. You know, last through the weather a lot more than the previous ones. One of my favorite ones to come out of here was the shoes. Now here's the thing: before 1818, all pair of shoes were both left feet. Now here's the thing, I don't want you to think like, you know how the shoe are now, how it's like the bottom of the heel's like this and it curves in, you know, for the left foot. It didn't curve necessarily. It didn't go like deep in there like how some of your other shoes are. It would curve, but just a little itty bitty bit. Okay, but basically it was a left shoe. Now, why did he do this? Because that way they can just easily make shoes. Brr, 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 and there you go. There you got a shoe. All right. So if they all made the same shoe, the left shoe, they can make plenty of them. Okay. That's where the term breaking in your shoe comes from. It comes from that saying because that's how you got your right foot to feel good in there. You had to break it in, and your foot would mold itself into that shoe. Okay. Um, and also, if you have, let's say you can't dance, there's an old saying you have two left feet. That's where it came from. Okay. Sewing machine. Now, this new invention made clothes easier to make in mass production. So instead of knitting it by hand, things like that, which would then cost a lot, but it made that blouse and stuff like that unique because there wasn't that many. Now with the sewing machine, they could make a bunch of those shirts, blouses, or whatever it may be, and then they could sell them. Okay, so it made expensive clothing less expensive, and it made cheap clothing even cheaper. Okay. Another thing that came about was the perfection of canned food. Because sometimes when people would get canned food and they open it up, if it's been a while, you know, or if it's actually sometimes even a short amount of time, there would be like mold and like fur and some of that growing inside of it already because they didn't case it very well. Okay. But by this time, the early 1800s, they perfected it so that the food wouldn't spoil right away. You know, it would take some time. So the expiration date went from this much time to this much time. Okay. And lastly was in 1832, Samuel Morse perfected the telegraph and developed the Morse code. Now, here's the thing. Back in the day, the way to communicate was through letters, through the newspapers, things like that. That sometimes took days. Because people with the Pony Express, they would ride. Even the fastest horses, um, they would take some time. It took a while for them to get from place to place. Okay, but thing is, the Morse code it's sent electronically through wires, and you would hear that dee 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 dee. That was how they communicated. Those dots and dashes, and it's the people would have to hear this stuff. Now, imagine hearing dee or like dee dee. Now, to you and me, that kind of sounds like the same. Like dee dee sounds like two deets. But to the trained ear, they would hear the deet like a stop, and then the other one goes a little bit longer. Deet. That let them know that's a dash. And these guys had to have those good ears, and they would write down the letters as it was coming in. So they were really good on this. Okay. And like I said, it was the fastest way to communicate at that point. So here's my next question to you. Which of the inventions or improvements mentioned do you think is the most impressive or the most useful, and why? So was it the interchangeable parts? Be able to buy the same, nuts and bolts and washers and things like that, um, basically at any store. Was it the shoes? Now you have left and right shoe. Or the improvement of the wagon made it stronger, better, tougher. Was it the sewing machine made clothes cheaper? Now people could actually, spend money on clothes and not worry about being broke. Was it the canned food? Now you can eat food, better. You can keep it stored in your pantry a lot longer than before. Or was it the Morse code? The ability to communicate almost instantaneously from one part of the country to another. So which one do you think was the most impressive or the most useful? Okay, so give you a couple minutes. Well, actually, you take your time because again, it's a video. So pause the video if you're still writing. But we're moving on in three, two, one. So with new jobs popping up in the north, immigration was basically inevitable. Okay. By 1820, New York had about 100,000 people. Now, nowadays to us, 100,000 is like, oh, that's a good sized town. But back then, that was, oh my God, that's a huge city. How could people be living there? I bet you they're elbow to elbows and just, they're like sardines in that town. You know, but that was back then. That's what they thought. That's a big, huge city. By 1860, there's 8 more cities that have grown up to 100,000 people. Between 1850 and 1860, 5 million foreigners came into this country. Now, here's again one of those mandala thoughts that people have, and that's between this early time, that's when the Irish came. The Irish came at that time, stuff like that, because already the railroads, things like that. So people think it's the Irish that were coming in. It was actually the Germans. The German people were coming, okay? They were really the big group at that time. The Irish didn't come in until 1845, and they really only came because of the potato blight. Basically, the crops that they had, the main course of their food, which was potatoes, um, was dying off. There was diseases from the ground and insects and things like that, and bad weather. So it was just a multitude of things that just hit Ireland really bad. And these Irish people, a lot of them either stayed there, some of them died, a lot of them died, and then some came to the United States because they heard about America having jobs and the land of opportunity and things like that. So as the population grew, the wages for labor went down. Now, thankfully today, now thanks to like labor unions and things like that, we have a minimum wage. The lowest your boss can pay you for a job is at this point. At this time, they didn't have that. So if a company knew there was going to be a bunch of immigrants coming in, what they would do is they tell the workers, hey, um, we got people coming in, they need jobs. And here's the thing, we either got to ask you to cut your pay or you get to get fired. Okay, so it's your choice. A lot of people quit. Some people stayed and they took a lower pay. Um, and that's the thing. The jobs, they knew they were going to get somebody to do the job one way or another. So the only thing they're worried about is saving money and on how much to pay their workers. Okay. So with new immigrants coming in, that means different languages, religions, cultures, customs, and there were some natural born citizens who were kind of like, oh, things are going to get bad. Things are going to get really bad around here. So really quickly, before we move on, I would like for you to basically create a list of different languages you've heard people say to, near, or around you. Okay, so nothing on TV, things like that. No, near you, around your vicinity. Okay, so I put several languages on here: English, Spanish, French, Chinese, Vietnamese, German, Japanese. Uh, Tagalog. From my understanding, that's the Filipino language. Now, if that isn't, please let me know, but that's what I was told from a friend of mine who's Filipino. They told me that's their language. Okay. So also there's Korean, Latin, Arabic, and Russian. Now, for those of you guys who've had me before in other classes, you've heard me, or unless you weren't there in class, then I guess you're safe. But if you have been in class, you would know that I have spoken French to you, Latin, and some classes, couple classes, Russian. Okay, were they good? No, they weren't that great, but I did still speak French, Latin, Russian to you guys. So if you were there in class and you remember that, be sure you put that down that you've heard that spoken around you. Okay, so create your lists. If you're still writing, keep writing. If you're not, we're moving on in three, 2, 1. All right. So nativism. This is basically when people believe that, it's our country. We're here first. This is our country. Everyone else coming in, you're illegal. You should not be here, that type of thing. And they felt that there should be a limit to immigration. How many people can come into this country? They did everything in their power to basically keep foreign born people and Catholics from being in political office. Okay, they did what they could, whether it's intimidation, whether it's spreading rumors, things like that. They tried everything. Now, here's the thing: the American Party, formed in 1854, they became known as the Know Nothings. Now, that means not that they were dumb, like I know nothing, but rather they like if something happened to some immigrant person, or some area where the voting was happening and for people who were predominantly immigrant or were immigrant, um, and something happened, these people would be rounded up and be like, "What'd you do?" I don't know. I don't know anything about that. They more likely did it, but they would just stick to constantly saying, "I don't know nothing. I didn't see nothing. I didn't hear nothing. I don't know what you're talking about." And they constantly used that to their advantage, and they became then known as the Know Nothings because people knew they did stuff, but they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Mhm. They wouldn't say I didn't do it, things like that. No, I don't know nothing. Don't know nothing about it. So that's why they got called Know Nothings. Now, with this stuff going on, with the wages going down and stuff like that being taken advantage of by the owners, people started to realize that labor unions were needed to get better, working conditions, better pay, benefits. But just like the Articles of Confederation, excuse me, the unions were powerless. They had no teeth. They couldn't threaten anybody because they were nothing, you know. So what some companies did was they actually said, you know what, let's try to get this um, union groups illegal. And they basically talked to politicians and some of that, and they told them, and some of them may have paid off, don't know, saying these guys are disrupting business. Business is what makes our country go, and these guys are hurting it. They guys are trying to make it worse. They try to even give them a bad look in newspapers, saying that they hate America. And if you notice, some of that stuff still goes on to this day. People use that type of notion, the type of comments. Oh, they hate America. Well, why? Because they want stuff better for people, or they don't believe just what you believe, so they hate America. You know. So there's that. So here's your exit ticket question. Pick one of the following. Why are roads, railroads, and canals so important in the early 1800s? Okay. So if you need to refresh yourself, go back to that. Um, Second question, why was there such a rise of immigration in the northern states, but not in the southern states? So remember, we talked about what's northern states was having. Starts with an F. Okay. And also you should know what was going on in the South. Did they need workers in the South? Okay, so think of like that. Last one is, do you think nativism supporters have a claim? Do they have a claim that, that this country was being taken over or being overrun by immigrants, and that they were going to change the culture, change the language and stuff like that? Okay. So before I say I log off completely, let me just tell you this: that question about the investments. I was going to wait till now to tell you, but that Cadabra, that was actually the starter name of Amazon. Speedy Service System, that was the original name for McDonald's. And the last one, Price Club name, that is actually the name for Costco. Now, the reason I didn't tell you at that time was because I don't want you guys changing your answer. Hopefully, you're not changing it now, because the thing is, that's the thing with investments. you don't know if it's a good investment or a bad investment until it starts picking up. You know, it's easy to see a success story after it's already been success. So J.C. Penney, Best Buy, they're already successful. So it's easy to say, yeah, I'll invest in that. But it's hard to pick on, help somebody out from the bottom, and who knows, they might be something big like Amazon, Costco, or McDonald's. It's a gamble. Sometimes they pay off, sometimes they don't. Okay. So, with that being said, I hope you guys had a good day. Hope you learned something new. Um, and I'll see you guys later in class. All right. So, take care. Be safe.